everyone for another live podcast, this time at the Europe Drum Show. Super delighted, super stoked to be joined by Jojo Mayer. Jojo, thanks so much for coming along. It's a real pleasure to have you. How are you today?
Considering the state of the world, splendid.
It's a very good answer. Very good answer. Is this, well, I guess it's only been running for 2 years, the Europe Drum Show. Were you around last year?
Europe? No, this is the first time here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And
at the UK drum show I was before,
yeah. And I mean, because are you based in Zurich?
I'm based in Switzerland, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because we flew into Zurich, so was it just an easy drive for you to get
here? Yeah, I love it. I'm going to be sleeping in my own bed after my performance. I love it.
That's always a plus. I can imagine, especially for a touring musician, it's a big plus. So speaking of touring, in the preparation for this, I did a lot of research. Obviously, your current project of MeMachine, and initially I was going to try and explain it, but then rather than do it a disservice, I thought it would make more sense if you could give us an overview of what this project is and why it's important to you.
Okay, well, it's my pleasure. Well, essentially the whole thing started in like 2019, and Brian Eno invited me to like some sort of like an experimental session, and that was the first time where I was exposed to his system, his generative system, and he hooked me up to his system, and I was like, took me a minute to understand what was going on, and at some point, like he said, well, this is all you, it's coming from your input. I thought like, wow, okay, this is like a really amazing idea, and I saw that this is going to be a part of the future of like how we make music. And I thought, I said to myself, well, if I had a year off, then I would learn how to program those machines. And then a couple of months later, the pandemic happened, and I had not 1 year, but I had 2 years to, get into coding and learn how to create signal chains, and I started to get going, and I did my first little things, and I sent it to Eno, and he was very generous, and it's like, that's great, continue. So for me, it was like, okay, and then I started to put the system together, and essentially what it is, it's a generative system is a music system that to various degree autonomously can create musical output. It kind of invents things. You give them a set of data, and from this they will create variations, basically. All right. So what the system does, it reacts to the input of my drumming to certain very simple parameters like density, volume, phrasing, couple of very simple parameters, and according to probability settings, which I can program and like dial in, it will create something in response that relates to the things that I played. Okay, now the way a probability works, you have to understand, if you have a setting between 0 and 1, if the probability is at 0, then the machine will just basically parrot everything that I do. Okay, if I go like ba 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 ba, it will go ba 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 ba, or the ba 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 ba. It's very predictable. Now I can dial in the probability on a range between 0 and 100, where 100 is going to be completely chaotic and without much coherence. It will do anything, and if we line up, it will be just accidental. So my job is to dial in the probability at a spot where it creates a relationship to the stuff that I play. And we'll, okay, this is good. So I play an idea, and maybe it could be a bass line or pads or anything really. And in real time, it's being fed back to me. So I hear, okay, this comes as a result of what I just played a fraction of a second before, and then I react to that. And my reaction to that generates the input for the machine again.
Yeah.
So this is a perpetual exchange, improvisational exchange between me and the machine that will bring me to places that I sometimes cannot expect. And this is really a very new way how to create music, you know, and we haven't seen the end of it, you know. This is just like, there's so much going on and so much advancement with those type of technologies, you know, that it's very magical for me to like do this. Now, what's the reason why I do it? So the reason for me to do it is, you know, artistically at some point you will find out what type of animal you are, you know, and I like adventure. Curiosity is important to me. I like to discover something new. So the heroes that I was exposed to, the music that I like, you know, all of them, they unite one very important trait, which is innovation. Is it James Brown, or is it Pink Floyd, or is it John Coltrane, or is it Louis Armstrong? You know, all these people, or Aphex Twin, you know, these were innovators. So I feel strongly drawn to that aspect of human creativity to create something that didn't exist before. These tools create leeway for me to go straight forward in like a straight line, which is of course never straight, but always like this. But the trajectory is very clear. And why with the machine now? You know, we're in a transitional phase right now, culturally, you know, with AI, blah, 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 and, you know, nobody really knows what's really going on. It's very black boxy. And for me, working with a machine that provides this generative aspect, I really find out more about what separates humans from machines, and what is it worthwhile to cultivate, you know, as right now most of the instances where people use AI for artistic expression, it's very, very flat. It's kind of like an endless remix of, or an interpolation of stuff that we already known. And this is not how human creativity works, you know, like accidents is important, chaos is, you know, like non-linear developments, not like, okay, I'm gonna do something that never was here before. I'm gonna take a Bob Marley song and I change his voice with Frank Sinatra's. Wow, okay. This is not how you create new things, but you create new things like, let's say, a good example of like, is distortion on a guitar. Like, no musician aimed at like, I hear the sound of a distorted guitar. No, they played guitar with an amplifier and they played in a big hall and they cranked the thing because it was not loud enough, and the tube started to distort, and the sound of rock and roll was born like this. Yeah. This is something that AI cannot do. Yeah. You know, this is how we work. So artistically, I'm very attracted to this because I think right now, I believe, and that's just me, is the most important moment in human history that will either go this way or this way. And I think I want to make a contribution that we can continue.
Well, I hope we go the right way or the good way, whichever way that is.
You know, that depends on their opinion on like on your, you know, I will have to sacrifice certain securities. You know, like it's a very dangerous zone and sometimes very frustrating because you have to be able to tolerate ambiguity. You like not knowing if this is good or not. Yeah. You know, and you just like rely on your instincts to lead you to a place where nobody has been before. Yeah. You know, so
which can be very daunting. it can be very daunting to
very,
new
very, 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 very.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, it's like that's a part of like all the new ideas are hibernating in the unknown and waiting to be discovered. Everything that we don't know is in the unknown. So it's important to take that step, you know, and expose yourself to not knowing. You know, that I think that's also like a part of the socially a big cultural problem, because everybody claims to know how things work, and it's obviously not true. It creates chaos, you know, and we have a situation like, you know, I mean, we had it before, and we believed that like, oh, okay, well, we're smarter now, this is not going to happen again, and boom, here we are again, you know, like, so I'm very much concerned with promoting values, important values, you know, curiosity, humor, empathy, curiosity, etc., etc. And that's what I'm trying to articulate and express with my music.
Yeah, I mean, thank you firstly, because it's incredibly fascinating, this project. I had never seen anything like it when I stumbled onto it.
That's good.
I have many questions, but I think the one I want to start with, first of all, correct me if I'm wrong, is it accurate to describe it as artificial intelligence?
That's what?
Artificial intelligence, the machine that you're playing with.
Okay. I use AI with it, but it's more a workflow situation.
Okay.
You know, let's say like, you know, I have to solve certain coding problems where, you know, I'm not a coder, you know, I'm a musician. You know, I can code a little bit, but, you know, I have people that help me with it. But, you know, sometimes you go like, well, I'd like to split a MIDI signal into like 3 ways. One that is assigned to rhythm and the other one to pitch, you know, like, so, you know, there's certain AI that I can ask me to build an interface like this.
Okay.
And so they build it for me. So I have to prompt them, can you create a machine that does this? And, you know, for this it's good. Or certain machine learning things, you know, like I can train my interfaces to behave a certain way, you know, so I teach them before we go on stage. However, the actual moment and the instance where the music is being produced, there's no AI tools that can do this. You know, it's a matter of speed, latency, you know, like we're not there yet, you know. I don't care what some people tell you, you know, no, we're not there yet. Like, it's a lot of hype there. So as far as I have not seen any evidence of like being able to create what I'm aiming for in real time.
Okay.
Otherwise I would use it.
Yeah.
So yes, I use AI, but the system does not relay on AI. It uses it, but it doesn't relay on it.
Okay. And have you received any...
Yet.
Yeah.
I have to say.
One day. And as kind of we've been touching on, AI's got this kind of stigma to it these days, where it can be used for good, it can be used for other means. Have you received any like criticism for this?
Criticism?
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, that's a part of the game, you know. Like, you know, look, you cannot create anything new without deviating from the norm. Deviating from the norm is controversial because it's the norm. That's the belief system. If you go away, then you will find people who go like, no, wait a minute, you can't do this. Well, that's a part of innovation. I mean, you know, then I'm in a club with people that were far more talented than I were, like Galileo Galilei, or, you know, you name it, you know, Tesla. Yeah. You know, that's a part of the game. You know, you have to be able to withstand it. You know, criticism is fine. You know, and I mean, there's also criticism. You know, like my girlfriend, for instance. You know, she's my fiercest critic, and she's also the most potent one. because she understands, there's such a deep understanding of music and culture in general that, you know, she could go like, oh, I don't think this is a good idea. Yeah, I understand why you would, but I think you should not do that. Okay. And I will listen to that. So there's criticism that is aimed at something that maybe is outside of your current understanding that is extremely helpful. So the right criticism is a very precious gift, and I'm always open to it. And you have to understand where the criticism comes from. Whether this criticism comes from jealousy, from fears, like you disregard it, don't pay attention.
Yeah, and I want to say as well that I think earlier on, and you described you have this kind of natural curiosity to innovate and develop. And looking back at the stuff you're doing with Nerve and the work you're doing in New York, that I guess is another example, right, where you're taking jazz and you're blending it with jungle, drum and bass, whatever it may be. Were you at the time also getting criticism at that period?
I think it was getting less criticism than I was getting misunderstanding, because people didn't really understand what it is. Like, okay, now, well, I was in New York at the time, you know, so breakbeat culture and jungle, and you know, that's British culture, the Jamaican culture, that comes from there. So I was basically in the wrong place for doing this, but I loved it. I'm European, so I related to it somehow. But in America, there was a very small community of like DJs that, you know, were doing break beats and stuff like that. And when I went like, you know, I'd like to put together a live band that improvises and plays with this type of texture, those type of beats, those type of sound. You know, I would talk to my friends, you know, that were kind of in the jazz, hip hop, fusion, crossover. I mean, a pretty eclectic, you know, worked with a lot of people that in the beginning of neo soul, like Michel and Degeocello, and or like black rock, you know, like Vernon Reid, etc. So, but also John Zorn, which is like the very, you know, left field jazz downtown improviser, composer stuff. So I was kind of like in a very eclectic environment, also hanging out with DJs, but also with jazz musicians. So that's not a lot of people do that. Either here or so. I took from many different places and say, well, you know, I want to do this drum and bass stuff. Well, you mean just a drummer and the bass player? They didn't understand because they never heard it. Yeah. Because they don't pay attention. They just only like, they go like, oh, this guy, oh, Chick Corea is coming out with a new record. It's going back to the acoustic thing now, you know, whatever. And they're not really following anything else around, which is never my thing. So they didn't really understand it, what it was. And as a matter of fact, I was trying to put together a band, you know, and I had a hard time finding musicians because nobody knew about this stuff. And in the end, I don't know, it's just kind of legend by now. The reason why Nerve existed was there was a small club downtown in New York called the Izzy Bar, and the musical director or the booker, he was French, and I talked to a lot of people like, oh, I'm looking for a bass player who can play this type of stuff. You know, I'm looking for a keyboard player that understands this music. Because I had my stuff together. I could play the Avon breaks already, you know. So anyway, I talked to a lot of people, and this guy called me up one night, and he goes like, Jojo, I have a band cancellation next Wednesday. Would you like to play with your band? I said, well, which band? You know, I said, well, this drum and bass type of thing. I said, well, no, that's just an idea. I don't really have a band. So why don't you put something together? And I was like, no, with my perfectionistic state of mind back then. So I hung up the phone, and you know, 4 o'clock in the morning, we're like, wait a minute. Well, fuck it. You know, I picked up the phone and said, okay, I'll put something together. I had no idea how I was going to do it. So I called some DJs. I called a bass player. And I called all my friends, please come, you know, I'm trying something like, and it happened that like, you know, we had about 40 people, which is more than the average Wednesday night thing. And the DJs lost their minds because they had never seen anything like this as far as what I was doing, which sounded terrible. It was like a jam session, you know, kind of like noise. But the guy went like, all right, this is cool. You want to do it next night? So it became a regular thing. And then as I was doing the regular thing, it started to attract people. So, okay, you're going to watch this drummer that plays totally different, even if they had never heard drum and bass. You know, it was like kind of like it's very strange. People came down to that did not know Joel, and it was like, this is like I never heard a drummer play like this. No. So that party that I had at that point became somehow like a breeding ground or like a laboratory where then like one by one, you know, Tim LaFay came down and it was like, hey, you know, I really dig this music, and so, okay, well, next week we'll do it. He put his stuff down, and immediately we went a level up, you know. And so it came together slowly with basically, it was a party thing, a weekly thing that I did for a couple of years, you know, and that was like in 1997. So consider that was before YouTube, that was before internet. And the first time where kind of like the rest of the world as far as drum culture goes that became aware of what I was doing was like in 2007, 10 years later when I did the Modern Drummer Festival with Nerve, which by then was like, okay, the bands didn't exist. It was a rotating roster of musicians at that particular party. And at some point, like the New York Times came down there to say, hey, what's happening here? What's the name of the band? They were like, the name of the band is Nerve. You know, that's the first thing that came into my mind. Well, this was how the band was born. And all of this is something that AI cannot do. You know, you need a human, you need failure, you need accidents, you need reinterpretation, you need recontextualization, and that's what, you know, that's how human creativity works.
And it's interesting, as you were telling the story, a lot of the words that you mentioned earlier about chaos and curiosity and innovation, it's like they just happened. You know, the unpredictability of the phone call, and then you change your mind, and everything kind of finds its own place. Yeah. As it should.
It's a very complicated signal chain. You know, disturbance and stuff like failure sometimes. Yes, I'm saying like the distortion of guitar, like nobody was aiming at that.
Yeah.
You know?
It just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I was going to ask, going back to the MeMachine, could you speak a bit about how different it is playing with the machine as opposed to another human, and if you've learned anything about your own playing by playing with the machine?
Well, first of all, the programming of the system, it's a very solitary, it's like painting a picture or writing a book, or maybe composing too, you know, writing a song. Working with a band and working with other musicians, you know, you deal with one aspect that the machine doesn't provide you with, which is aesthetic preferences and aesthetic experiences. Like another musician brings in a whole other story. It's like I could be really well rested, and the person next to me could arrive with like 1 hour of sleep after partying all night, you know, or that would have an influence on what we are going to do together. The machine is much more like a very honest and very straightforward and very sober reflective surface, you know, that I can put in and it warps something, but I understand everything that's going to come out, even if it's totally deconstructed, is still me, you know. So I'm not saying that one thing is better than the other. You know, this is interesting here, and this is here. One of the things that is better with working only with a machine is speed. You know, and I can take the responsibility for any idea if it may be completely nonsensical and idiotical, but I will take responsibility for it. I will just see if it works. If you were in a band, you go like, yeah, no, well, that sounds stupid, like well, I think we tried this again years ago, you remember when we decided this doesn't work? You have all these discussions about this is the democracy, really, so working with the machine is, that's more like, that's monarchy, However, I'm getting humbled quite a bit, not just by my technical limitations, but also by my finding myself in like a place where I don't actually understand what's going on.
Yeah. And is that? Do you mean like literally on stage in a moment?
On stage, not so much. However, this could change. This depends kind of like a little bit. How much guts I have, because I could before I go on stage, I could turn the dial on the probability into a range. Well, I'll be surprised more often, and then I was like, then what's like happening, if it's at the sweet spot, like playing with the machine, okay, it's like when everything works well, it feels like the machine can read my mind, which is of course not true. But we have a tendency to anthropomorphize a machine, or anything, or a teddy bear, it's just a piece of fabric, but we skewed and we relate to it. You do the same thing with like the machine. All right. So sometimes I go like, wow, well, how is this possible? This is, and then you go, it's like the same thing as you think of a person and then your phone rings and then it's that person. Yeah, I was just thinking of you, something that everybody experienced. This happens a lot when I play with the machine. However, sometimes the machine will render an output where I go like, what the hell is this? This is garbage. Now, while this is happening, I have a couple of hundred people like witnessing this. So in order for me to provide a positive experience for everybody, including myself, I need to kind of recontextualize the mistake and make it into something good, right? So another thing that AI cannot do, recontextualizing. So basically what it is, like John Coltrane once said, if you play a mistake, repeat it, and then it's no longer a mistake. So recontextualizing the mistake by repeating it. So I do the same thing with the machine. So sometimes I can fly, and sometimes I have to work. I go like, oh, this is weird. Okay, let's go with this. Yeah. This has changed a lot of things about my attitude about music. Where, for instance, like if I confront I'm confronted with something that sounds really bad. It's like, oh, this bass drum sounds like a plastic bucket. And I say, well, a good musician can play music with a plastic bucket. I'm sure, like, you give a plastic bucket to Giovanni Hidalgo or Steve Gadd, he will do something that not everybody can do that will sound good. So I embrace what I have, and I try to serve it with my experience and my knowledge and my intention to express myself in any way available at the moment. Yeah. And I think that's what separates like a really good musician from an average musician. Right?
Yeah. It's a dizzying concept, especially for someone like as I said, it was the first kind of encounter I've had with this kind of technology and approach. It seems groundbreaking. The last question I had on this was if there's any kind of, because presumably if the machine is kind of in the moment reacting to what you're playing, is it gathering any information or data that can then be analyzed, or is that?
Well, as far as like a prompt, that you would put a prompt into like an AI or a large language model. No.
Something in the sense that I don't know. Let's say you do 50 shows with MeMachine. and it collects all of the musical information
Yes.
from your side, and it says Jojo tends to play this pattern next to this pattern.
Yes.
And he tends to do this rudiment, you know.
Yes. Okay. Number one, this would be possible, but I'm not sure if it would serve what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I don't think it would serve the event of music unheard. Look, let's give you an example. Like, I did experiment with a friend of mine, Marco Tempest. He's a person, like, he works for a lot of entities like MIT, NASA. He's very big on robotics, and you know, he's like a real whiz kid. And you know, he's a friend of mine for like many decades. He's, by the way, he was the producer of my instructional DVDs, like the Secret Weapons one. Like, he actually produced those things, and he was very informative on how to structure the whole thing, because that was also when we made that DVD that was nothing like it, you know. So this is a guy that thinks outside the box. So we made, so he follows my work, you know, and they say, okay, well, maybe we could try something. Right now, the machine listens to your audio and interprets it. What about if we had a camera that could actually look at your visual cues, you know, see my facial expression, and maybe go like, oh, okay, Jojo goes like this, well, let's take you to the bridge now, you know. And the result of that was like, well, for the time being, I could do this with the machine and go like, oh, Jojo gets excited, or Jojo wants this. Maybe it's just push a button and then we go to the bridge. Yeah. You know, because that's all I want. So I leave it to someone else to do this type of research, because I'm trying to stay in my lane. I only branch out as much as I have to, you know, but this is about something else.
Yeah.
My intuition is it's not the right trajectory. I think we found ourselves into a place where we wish we were not, if we do that.
Right. Yeah. No, it makes sense. It's probably more just something perhaps neat to look at rather than useful.
Well, I'm just saying, you know, like we have to understand who we are and how we got that far, and evolution and natural selection and those big picture issues, which are informative to whatever it is that you do. In my case, it's art and playing the drums and making music. You know, it's like I'm influenced by this, you know, my way of thinking.
Yeah.
I'm interested in how the mind works, you know, and I'm interested how my own mind works. I'm interested in freedom. But I understand without responsibility, you can have it, you know. So we have, you know, all these things, freedom on this side and security on that side. And unfortunately, you can't have the cake and eat it. You're always going to be fluctuating between those extreme polar, you know. Right now, everybody is so concerned with like safety that they're giving up their freedom. And if you do that, I don't think you deserve either, you know. So we have to kind of like, freedom without responsibility creates complete chaos. So, but freedom is important for me. So this machine, how crazy it is, you know, this machine, the way I program it, provides me with a new sense of freedom that I'm trying to communicate. Say, hey, wait a minute, we can do this in a different way. Yeah. You know, why are we still using certain protocols where they're like outdated? Yeah. First, you have to understand that a protocol is outdated, and then you replace it with something new.
Yeah.
And that's progress. That's how progress works.
Yeah. As you're speaking, it is. If someone hasn't listened to this interview or hasn't listened to you speak about this process and your process, I think a lot of the things you've said can be taken from you playing, if that makes any sense.
I hope so. You know, I mean, that's, this is the big artistic challenge. Art is not what the artist sees, but art is what the spectator can experience through your art. It's a big challenge. But mainly, what exposing the person or what the person can experience from the get-go is like, okay, this is a human, and I'm bringing together one of the oldest technologies of mankind, which is the drums, with one of the newest one, which is generative technology. And I put those together and see out of that tension fields what emerges. And I think it will give us cues that are useful, as I believe art has always been giving people cues on how we could continue to go. And there was always new technology coming in, like photography. Without the innovation of photography, we might not have someone like Van Gogh starting to paint abstract, because I don't longer have to make portraits of people because we have a camera, so now I can do something else. Yeah. So that's a good example of like dispatching outdated protocols. For maybe to conclude as far as like geekery goes, one of the things that the MeMachine system completely obliterates the function of a bar line. A function of a bar line as far as why do we need bar lines? Mainly we need bar lines so an ensemble of musicians know where we are in the song, okay? There's also an emotional component because a 4/4 measure feels different than a 3/4. But mainly it's a measure of coordination. Now the machine doesn't need that, because I can decide on a whim. I can play one bar of 21/16 and bop, and that's one, and the machine will do exactly that. So there's a type of speed that the machine can communicate with me that no musician is ever going to be able to do, right? So what do we do? Now I can create music with the bar line becomes only an emotional issue. No longer, I don't have to discuss it. Okay, we're going to play 6 bars of 4, and then the B section is going to be in 3, and there's a little tricky thing. We're going to put 1 bar of 7, or we're going to make a metric modulation, and there's going to be some quintuplets here, and we're going to have a little Zappa adventure, and we're going to come back, and in the end it's 4/4 again. Boom. I can do this in real time without preparing anything, and the machine will do it. So I can play crazy stuff like Black Page, very easy for this machine to do. Not so easy is play a blues and make it work, But that's what I have to do. I don't expect the machine to do that.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Is there anything you can tell us about what's coming up in terms of shows or projects, releases?
Yeah, I'm in the process of expanding MeMachine with another musician.
Okay. So
I have 2 humans putting input into the machine and see what's happening.
Okay. And we'll react to both simultaneously?
Yes. That's the next adventure. So it's like I'm facing it's kind of intimidating, but it's going exponentially in many different ways. So this is like my next big challenge. You know, it's almost like you get your first black belt, you know, and then you start again doing the same thing with the same katas, you know, like it's basically it's always coming back, starting again with a different point of view.
Yeah. Fascinating. Well, I'm gonna keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Thank you again so much for your time, Jojo. Have a great show tomorrow.
All right. Thank you.